If your father is still with us, I highly encourage you to reach out and express Happy Father's Day and have a phone call. While you can. So
Tyler,
don't take it for granted.
I read an article. I read an interview you did talking about your father and how he would take time with his auto mechanic clients,
Yeah.
and it was a great tribute. So really insightful. I enjoyed that.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I remember the interviewer asked me kind of the what he was asking me what I learned, and the most important things I've ever learned. I was like, well, one of the most important things I ever learned was just watching my dad and how he did what he did, and yeah, uh, you know, and it was kind of the learning without knowing you're learning. When you're that young, you're learning it unconsciously, which is often kind of the most powerful learning you can do when you're.
Did you say 19 years old?
Huh?
Did you say 19 years old?
When I was 19, he passed away. Yeah, but I mean,
I know.
I was kind of his shadow from the time I was like, from 4 until and then
And
just be yeah.
you came to Japan in 1992, right? You say.
Yeah, I came to Japan around the same time. Yeah, when I was 18. Yeah.
Oh, so you were here when he passed on, or were you with him?
Was I in Tokyo? No, the day he passed away, I was back in
Great.
San Diego. My sister called me in the morning. She was with him when it happened. He passed of a heart attack. And here's the sad thing. I share all this because in case you find yourself in a similar situation down the road with a parent or a loved one, his doctor had told him that his heart wasn't good and he needed to take better care of himself. And I thought, oh yeah, I was 18 at that time, and I was like, oh yeah, I should start taking you to the gym and going for walks and changing life, because the doctor said if you don't change, you might not be around for another year. And it was like, um, what can I say? It was like, yeah. Well, I was so young, and he's dad. Like he's the one who calls the shots, not me. Like, what am I to tell my dad? He needs to take less time at work and go for a walk, right? And then, sure enough, a year later, yeah, it just hit him one morning. He passed out. It was Monday morning, and Monday mornings, you look at the data around heart attacks. It's like it's this huge. It's this statistic anomaly how many heart attacks happen on Monday mornings, especially for men. And he died at 49 of a heart attack. His dad died at 49 of a heart attack, and then that's why I did 23andMe, because there's a gene that you can track down to see if you inherited the that a particular gene responsible for that. Luckily enough, I don't have that one. And at the same time, that fundamentally changed my life. Like I've intentionally avoided overworking myself and putting myself in any situation, and I've taken much better care of my diet and exercise and all that, yada yada. But you know, I still feel like he's watching my journey and kind of driving the simulation from the back seat in a weird way. And
This is that concept of, when they talk about autonomous and can it be hacked. This is the programming that happens. It's that core value system. It kind of goes back to what I was saying, is that you're very cool, you're very chill, and it's your dad. It's what you learned from being around other people, you know.
yeah, you know what else though is if you've not had a parent pass, or somebody super close to you pass away, it changes your life very fundamentally in ways that you can't imagine before. And it changes your value system, and in a yeah, so it's wild. Completely changes your life when your first parent passes away, and it's whew,
My
it's
my
so
mother
heavy.
passed away in
Yeah,
January last year too. A
yeah,
few days before I touched down in Singapore, so I was not with her.
yeah,
But I was in time for the funeral. But it's okay.
yeah,
But she's very lucky. She passed on before COVID took over the world. So
yeah. And then with COVID this year, I mean, yeah, a lot of people lost a lot of loved ones in the past year. And let's move it to the first kind of headline. This variation, the Delta variation, which is creeping up and kicking Asia's ass, is now getting into Israel, where they're reporting 2 new kind of spikes in one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. One of the countries who's done the best at fighting it, kind of from the start. And I think the U.S. needs to be particularly mindful of this, especially the parts of the U.S. that felt, that they didn't need to be so concerned about it.
Come on, Tyler. It's over here. Come on, it's over. We're all partying again.
Yeah, on that point, I'll just say this out of love for my American friends, that in Thailand, in Vietnam, Taiwan, we never really had COVID because we actually controlled it from the get-go. And this new variation is far less controllable, given the ways that we've controlled it in the past, repeatedly controlled it, managed it in the past. And this one is just far more tricky to control. So I think it's going to kick America in the ass if people don't proactively get a jump on the vaccinations. They're going to pay. They're going to pay for it.
There are pockets of the U.S. around the country that are very low vaccination rates, and everyone's out partying now. So it's really scary.
I take no pleasure in saying we're going to see a textbook definition of karma unfold, and it's all. Well, it wouldn't be so concerning, except we had a headline here about yesterday, I believe it was, from Dr. Danish about the what do you call it? There's now kind of
permanent brain.
Yeah, there's brain implications.
Long COVID.
Yeah, long COVID.
And even though, it's almost like the ghost of Donald Trump, because this was made into a partisan thing. And now you're seeing places where people, often along political lines, I hate to say it, but are lagging behind in vaccinations with the Delta variant creeping up. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, exactly right. And let's hope everything works out well. And I mean, the irony is those same people are taking the position that they're adults. They got their big pants on. It's up to them. They can make decisions for themselves. Okay, fair enough. Let's see how it goes. I just wish they had more of a global perspective and see what's been happening in Taiwan and Vietnam and Thailand, where we've been so good about it up until this new variation, which is it's a different animal, especially in I'm assuming on this part, but the warmer climates now, and the southern part of the U.S. is particularly warm at the moment, and there's particularly a lot more indoor air conditioning stuff going on, of which there's been many suggestions that that's an ideal environment for spreading inside of air conditioned environments. So it's strange. We'll see how it goes. Let's just hope for the best. And the more interesting breaking news, and I guess Jane hasn't been able to join us, is that we were just over in the Politics Media 101, Medium Politics 101. I always get that confused. But Jeff was running the show there today, and I often share one of the last headlines before we all jump in here, as I did. And what I shared there and what I'm about to share here is, and let's get Harry up on stage. He might be relevant to this, is that there was an individual named Nathan Law in Hong Kong, who's a pro-democracy activist in Hong Kong, and was elected as the youngest lawmaker in Hong Kong at the age of 23 and a Yale graduate. Very well known. He was also one of Time's 100 People of the Year. Very well known in Hong Kong. Anyways, he had a website, and he used Wix, which is kind of this platform where anyone can make a website rather easily. No doubt you've seen some of these ads to try building a website on Wix, which he did. And Hong Kong the government didn't like Harry's website or Nathan's website, and so they told Wix to take it down. the interesting thing about that is that Wix is located in Israel. It's an Israeli startup. And Wix did take it down. And Nathan, being a lawyer, contacted Wix with the receipts and said, "Yo, I live in a democracy, and here's I did nothing illegal of any kind, And so, what's up?" And so Wix reinstated his website and apologized and said it was a mistake. Interestingly, and that's Nathan is. Obviously connected with my friend Jane, who's joined us here a few times, even recently, where we discussed how she is able to break she breaks more news in tech than any single person, and in fact, more than most tech publications combined. She's constantly breaking all of the upcoming features of all of the most popular apps. And then Jane on Twitter today was saying that now that Wix has restored Nathan's website, saying that it was a mistake and apologizing, she said it wouldn't be surprising now if Hong Kong blocks access to the website locally by demanding that the internet service providers do so, essentially blocking Wix from making the page publicly viewable within Hong Kong, which then a few hours later, exactly 8 hours ago from right now, she updated her tweet. Yep, as expected, the site is now banned in HK at the ISP level. And that is very concerning, my friends, because that is the beginnings of the internet in Hong Kong being done in a similar manner to the Great Firewall of China, of mainland China, where they don't have the free open internet. And the evolution of that is worth remembering because it started in the exact same manner, where there was content that China initially was on the open internet. They realized, there's content that we don't like. Let's block it at the ISP level, as they just did in this case with Wix. And then they realized, there's way too many sites to block, and there's always new sites, and we can't always play whack-a-mole endlessly forever with a billion web pages. So we need to start over and just start approving websites that we approve of, and everything else will be blocked by default. Any new thing any new moles are outside of our walled garden, and we will, work on a approved only list. And so that's how it's that's how they're able to keep very tight controls on the internet within China. And so we now are seeing the beginnings of, in Hong Kong, the slippery slope towards Hong Kong no longer being part of the Western internet and being kind of brought into the Chinese mainland Great Firewall of China, as it's referred to, which means bye-bye Twitter and Facebook and Clubhouse, by the way, and all of the Western websites that exist outside of China. And that's a very sad slippery slope that they just took some early steps on. So it's going to be not fun to watch how that unfolds in the days to come. But that nobody's covered this yet. No tech journalist has, although they will soon, because every tech journalist follows Jane. So I suspect some tech journalists are writing this story as we speak about the beginnings of the Great Firewall of China expanding beyond mainland China. Which, by the way, it's safe to assume that it won't stop at just Hong Kong. Clearly, it's in Xinjiang region, and it will stretch. It's also, people have wondered also, will China perhaps include it as part of trade negotiations with, Pakistan, for example, which is a bordering country that they have incredible economic ties to, because it affords China to have access to the Arabian Sea through one of their neighbors. So they've invested incredibly heavily into Pakistan specifically so that they can have, routes and BRI and oil pipelines from the Arabian Sea through Pakistan into the back door of China through Xinjiang. If they start investing incredibly heavily into a region, they might require one of the conditions to be, how about we do all your 5G for you as well while we're at it? And, by the way, it's part of this our version of the internet, which is so much better. It's it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out, because by the crypto, their own digital currency as well plays into this in a similar way, where they're testing that in Hong Kong as well, as it was reported about a week ago. It's so interesting stuff, interesting times. Go ahead, Harry.
It also ties into the recent news about Apple Daily, right?
Exactly right.
Exactly
right. Yeah, because thank you for reminding me. So what Harry's pointing to is there is a publication called Apple Daily, the founder of which is a very infamous Jimmy Lai, is a billionaire in Hong Kong. And when the pro-democracy protests were starting, and it turned into riots, he came out very vocally and didn't want to go down without really making it publicly known what was on many Hong Kongers' minds, because many people felt they couldn't express themselves, and he felt it was incredibly important to say very loudly on his, because he had quite a large Twitter following. Or no, his Twitter following exploded as a result of kind of the role he took on of expressing what many people were afraid to say. And that got him in a lot of political hot water. He started being trailed for many weeks, which journalists documented that he was being followed by undercover operatives. And then he was apprehended, and they knew it was only a matter of time that these people who were following him everywhere would shove him into a car, as they did. And they took him to the police station. They eventually let him go back home because they can follow him everywhere he's going. And he's such a high profile figure, there's no chance of him leaving. Although there was worry that there was even weird rumors, was there not, that it starts getting conspiracy-ish about him planning to get into these boxes in a warehouse and being snuck onto a private jet and sneaked out of Hong Kong and blah, blah, blah. There was all these conspiracies about how he might be using his other billionaire friends to sneak him out on private jets and whatnot.
It seems absurd until you realize what happened with Carlos Ghosn from Nissan, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And a little bit, and a little bit of Snowden, a little bit of Snowden as well, because Snowden was in Hong Kong when shit went down, by the way, and realized he needed to get out of there, and ended up in a layover in Moscow airport, and that forced down the flight of, what was it, the Peruvian or Bolivian leader. They forced his private jet down. America forced that jet down, by the way, essentially. Do you guys remember that story? Oh my God, that is just wild. And so, by the way, when the Belarus Levchenko forced down that Ryanair flight recently over that journalist, and America's like, oh my God, the whole world's freaking out. Oh my God, they forced down that flight that flew over Belarus just to apprehend that journalist. Putin said, oh yeah, well, how about when you guys forced down the, I believe it was Bolivian leader, his private jet, and the way they did it, though, was very interesting. He was leaving, I forget where, and he was flying westward over Europe, and then all of a sudden, Portugal and Spain started saying, no, you can't enter our airspace. And they're like, but we need to refuel. And they're like, yeah, too bad, you can't enter our airspace. It's like, but we're supposed to land there just to refuel. Yeah, no, you can't enter. Both Spain and Portugal were like, you got to turn around then and land in Austria, which I recall is where he had to land to refuel. And then the Austrian president had to come and publicly apologize to him. It was suspected. He left Moscow, by the way. He left Moscow airport, and by the time he was in the airspace about to leave Europe, Spain and Portugal, for unknown reasons, said, no, you can't enter our airspace, and it essentially forced him to land unscheduled, which is not a forced landing by a military jet, but nonetheless, it's a forced landing because he's running out of fuel. So he landed in Austria, and then while landed, they essentially forced themselves on board to look for Snowden, because they thought Snowden had gotten on board at the Moscow airport to go down to South America. You guys remember this? That is such a wild moment in the Snowden story. But Snowden was still in the Moscow airport, hanging out pre-immigration desk for several weeks, and then Putin finally let him in under the condition that he not, politicize anything. And anyway,
do you think Snowden is in the Biden's list?
Is in what?
Biden's list.
That's a great question. Clearly, Trump wasn't going to do him any favors, but Obama also was no friend of Edward Snowden, and so I think Ed didn't have any reason for optimism given the similarities between Biden and Obama with their foreign policies. So it was kind of a non-issue. They didn't expect, and there wasn't a whole lot of hopefulness if Joe went. Now that he has won, it's just kind of a continuation. It'll be interesting to see. Snowden's not looking optimistic for the future because the next election's arguably between Biden and Trump, so there's again no cause for optimism in the near future. Anyway, I think there are maybe Sanders, if he had that might be a stretch, but if he were to have won, that might be somebody who might welcome Snowden back. I assume. I don't know. Maybe big Bernie supporters who know Bernie's policies would know better. Jeff might know. Anyway, it's all interesting. But so if you love the politics thing, do go follow Jeff on stage. And I imagine, Jeff, you have it. You must be in your bio. And I think you guys have another upcoming room in just a few hours, do you not?
Yeah. We have the New York Times chief diplomatic correspondent in just, it's at 1 p.m. ET. So what is that? Just over 2.5 hours. Really been looking forward to this one for a while. And then this Wednesday, we have the former Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta, coming on. So it's pretty exciting stuff. Yeah. So it's Politics Plus Media 101 is the club if anyone wants to check it out. Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Leon Panetta, that's one of your best gets yet. If not the best.
Yeah. And then we have 3 members of Congress in a row right after him. So it's pretty good stuff, and we're going to launch a podcast
Let me say this, folks. If you're not picking up what Jeff's laying down, that is as I've predicted. I want to take credit for just predicting your success, because it was obvious that it was going to be successful given the talent and the way that you guys do that room. Is to me the most important room in Clubhouse, and not it's not even close, because
thanks, man.
Because it has real world implications, because the midterm elections are coming up. The members of Congress, Jeff and Justin, are both on the ground professionally and geographically in Washington, D.C. with connections.
For better or worse.
Yeah. And have friends of influence in town, and are able to send invites to incredibly influential people in town, like Leon Panetta, and able to work and function as a very real bridge between Capitol Hill and Clubhouse. And they are doing that. And it's starting in baby steps, as all things do, but it's quickly escalating, as you just heard. So please do follow and show up with your feet. And when you get in the room, tweet it out and bring your friends. Here's why. Because it is, I'll make another prediction. If we do that together, then when they get, and they have 1,000 people in the room, 2,000, 3,000 people in the room, it makes it much more likely that they will continue to get better and better and better and better speakers, which bring more and more audience. And you can see how this could snowball and help Clubhouse tremendously as an app, because it could become, and I believe should become, the format and the place where members of Congress and politicians come to hold town hall meetings and speak to their constituents and, share their views. We could even have a debate potentially.
Totally.
Yeah.
And where Democrats and Republicans can actually have civil conversations. That's the idea.
And by the way, they've already had in that room some of the very best conversations that have ever happened in this app have happened in their room. Notably, many people will fondly remember the Israeli-Palestinian conversations that you guys
that was incredible.
ran.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
We had the top U.S. negotiator in the Middle East for 6 presidents, and an Israeli official and an Arab American scholar, and there were like 30,000 people tuned in. It was great. It was awesome, and we love your rooms here too, Tyler.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, we're doing our little jam over here, in the corner. We call it the geeks hanging out at the geek table in the high school lunchroom over here. We got our own thing going on. But yeah, it's truly inspiring what you're doing. Please support it in any ways that you can. And to that end, Sue's who was it? Anna Marie in Hong Kong. Amy Klobuchar is one of her advisors. Who she said she connected Justin with Amy Klobuchar, but Amy Klobuchar's father just died like the day before they connected via email. So she said maybe give it a little more time and then have Justin try and reconnect, because Amy Klobuchar was one of the presidential candidates in the last election and was very impressive, and is also coincidentally leading this charge against big tech at the moment, which, by the way, let's do this headline. That's all going down on Capitol Hill on Wednesday. So shit is about to hit the fan in a very big way on Wednesday for big tech. Maybe Jeff, maybe you know a little more color on that.
Yeah, so there are 5 bills, some conflict of interest and antitrust bills that are going to be voted on in the House Judiciary Committee. There's some bipartisan consensus. One of them has already moved in the Senate. One is an anti-competition one, which basically says that before you buy a smaller company, you'd have to certify that they don't compete. Really, the broader backdrop here is, do the antitrust laws in the U.S. and structures, which really date back to Teddy Roosevelt 100 years ago, and physical infrastructure and industries and railroad and oil, are those sufficient now for the types of entities that you so eloquently describe here as far as what they do in the data space? And that is a broader conversation I would love to have. I do need to jump here in just a minute. We're getting ready for the New York Times room later today. But yeah, so essentially these 5 bills will be up in the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday, and then we'll see where they go. Importantly, they don't really get as much into the privacy space. They're more in the antitrust space or some of the other, regulatory issues. But yeah, it should be interesting week on Capitol Hill.
Indeed. So stay tuned. I'll do, before I jump into my never-ending list of headlines, and you can send in headlines too, jump up on stage and share them verbally, and you can do both. Tweet them from your Twitter account. Just include our Twitter account so we see them, and then we can retweet the ones that we want to touch on. Just include our Twitter account, which is TNATW, as part of your tweet. Those are the first letters of tech news around the world, as people are already doing. Thank you to Evan and so many others who are doing that, as usual, and Cheryl and lots of folks on stage are doing this. And you can too. I will get into the best ones in a minute, but before I do, just want to see if anyone on stage is burning with a hot headline they want to share first. Going once. Going twice.
I mean, I have a few. I have a few that I'm trying to tweet out to you right now, but unfortunately, I'm having some issues. Okay. But okay, so one is crypto related.
Okay.
One of the co-founders of Coinbase, in continuing the analogy of the time right now in the crypto and blockchain world, they're continuing the analogy to the early days of the internet. And he's saying, I think it's Fred Ursum, and he's saying that like 95%, I think, of the NFTs that have been made, 90% of the NFTs will have no value in 3 to 5 years. It's Fred Ursum. So that's his story, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of dislike, from a lot of the people who have been selling NFTs, but I think that's probably right. I mean, I think 90% might be low. So there's a lot of reasons I have for that, but that's one headline. And I have another one.
I got a similar one, which is that Cheryl shared a few hours ago, interesting headline about crypto and how people, it says people brag about making money with their friends. Like a lot of the hype around Bitcoin is, boom, 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 and I'm up on Bitcoin and blah, blah, blah. Now that Bitcoin is going through a bit of a rough moment, you don't hear anyone saying I'm losing money on Bitcoin. And no doubt some people are. And so the point is that because you never hear people when they're losing, and usually only when they're gaining out of kind of a guilt and shame, the headline from The Guardian is, I put my life savings in crypto, how a generation of amateurs got kind of hooked on the hype. And it's an interesting deep dive. I just tweeted that one out from Cheryl, but go ahead with your next one, Alexandra.
Oh, okay. And that one I just talked about in a room last night, because so many people are coming into rooms on Clubhouse and they don't really understand anything about investing or financial statements or anything like that. But they don't want to learn as much as they just want someone to say, tell me what to put money in, tell me what to put money in, tell me what to put money in. And that I find extremely frustrating. It's probably the most common question I get. Is, what are you investing in? And it's not good. I mean, it's a bunch of people who, they don't have maybe my same goals, my resources, my strategy, my history. They don't have any of that stuff, my preferences, and they're just assuming that what works for me will work for them. So I find it very troubling. This goes back to the end of Glass-Steagall for me. I think all of this is a mess, and it could have been saved early on, and it wasn't. So here's the other headline, which is about the people who are trying to get into, who are trying to get their unemployment. They are doing this, God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I'm like not speaking English well. It is 7:30 in the morning here, but so they're doing this. They're using what they call Apple's facial recognition program to identify people who are getting unemployment. And the purpose is because apparently there's a huge amount of fraud in unemployment. That in itself can be a somewhat specious claim because that happens a lot, and it tends to be a more politically motivated statement than anything else. But so now they're implementing this facial recognition where your face is supposed to match your ID. And a huge number of people, somewhere, I think it's over 70% of people are getting denied. So I'm not really sure if the error is on the facial recognition side. It didn't say anything like that, or whether it is on, old IDs or something like that, or if it's, it could be racist, because I don't know if if you've covered this before, but quite a few facial recognition technologies have a lot of issues identifying people who are not white. So there's a lot of different possibilities. The article, unfortunately, was pretty shallow, so I don't really know more than that.
Yeah, and our friend X at Google, who is in the news, she had a big headline of her own in the past 48 hours about how Google is doing a new way to identify color tones and everything. And then I saw that headline. It was kind of widely covered. And then she on Twitter said, here's what I've been working on. And she tweeted out the link to that article, sort of claiming credit for that. She's the person leading that development at Google, which no doubt she is. So I just pinged her just now to see if she'll join us, as she has in the past, to give us a little inside scoop all about it, because nobody's really interviewed her about it yet. And we could do that right now if and when she jumps in. So please keep an eye out for a very attractive black lady by the name of X with a very big hairdo indeed. You'll know it when you see it. And just to let somebody jump in, Cheryl or anyone, if you see her jump into the room while I'm looking at. Yeah.
If I could just mention real quick that I posted that article that Alexandra just mentioned about ID.me on the Twitter page last night. But it's about ID.me, and they started in California.
Yep.
And now there's like over 30 states that have used them for unemployment for identification. So
exactly right.
That's the article.
Yeah, and because it's, in fact, the founder of ID.me was in a room with Nicholas and myself. Nicholas, many of you will know, is kind of the blockchain philosophical guru of sorts, and it was a really interesting conversation that we had with both the CEO, co-founder, and tech lead of ID.me, and all because Nicholas is primarily focused on using the blockchain for your own identity purposes, self-sovereign identity, and ID&Me is also trying to do digital identity. And then he was saying, yeah, well, you should be doing it on the blockchain and you should be doing it decentralized. They're doing it in a very centralized way. And then it started a very interesting conversation, as you can imagine. But maybe we can cajole them in as well. And thank you for that, David. I'll retweet that when I see it. I just, on this issue of identification and technology with identification, Poppy shared one a few hours ago that I just retweeted, that says ICO watchdog this is from the BBC. ICO watchdog deeply concerned over live facial recognition. The UK Information Commissioner has said she is deeply concerned that live facial recognition may be used, quote unquote, inappropriately, excessively, or even recklessly. Elizabeth Denham questioned what would happen if it was combined with social media or other big data. Yeah, that's where shit will get a little crazy, Elizabeth. There is a high bar for live facial recognition where we shop, socialize, and gather. She wrote new guidance for companies and public organizations using this technology has also been published. As it says, that facial recognition technology could be useful, allowing us to unlock our mobile phones or set up bank accounts online. But when people's faces are scanned and processed by algorithms in real time and in public places, the risks to privacy increased. We should be able to take our children to a leisure complex, visit a shopping center, and tour a city to see the sights without having our biometric data collected and analyzed with every step we take, she wrote. And that's where things get tricky because there are cameras everywhere, and it's rather trivial to connect these cameras to facial recognition systems, which will then identify everybody all the time. And you could also identify them by the way they walk, not just their face, as every Hong Konger knows. So, which, by the way, is why they started tearing down the quote-unquote smart street lamps that were being installed around Hong Kong, which included 5G antennas, but more notably cameras that were suspected to have facial recognition as part of them, because when people were getting arrested, even though they had masks and they realized the connection that those were people who had passed these new smart street lamps, then the citizens went on their own little mission to decommission these smart street lamps. Kind of an interesting story that never really picked up a lot of steam and predates Tech News Around the World because that was about 6-7 months ago. But a lot of other headlines going on about privacy laws comparison. I think, Cheryl, maybe you sent this one in, or maybe David, about the comparison between Russia and China and the U.S. on their privacy law comparisons. And it's a really interesting comparison of those three countries. I'm not going to read it, but we just retweeted it from Tech News Around the World, which is TNATW, the first letters of Tech News Around the World. Do follow us on Twitter. And you can see that article and do your own comparison between the privacy laws. And even within the U.S., things can change from region to region and are all over the world. And it makes it incredible. One of the most challenging new developments as a website like Clubhouse is maintaining compliance with all of the different sort of privacy laws of each country that you go into. And that's where you're now starting to see specialists like accountants. And, once taxes got so complicated that people started needing to hire accountants, now the privacy laws are now getting complicated to a degree where you need new third-party providers and services to help keep you compliant with the ever-changing updates to, user data privacy laws like the GDPR in Europe, for example. That alone can give a lot of companies a lot of headaches. The FBI, you guys remember this story from about 4, 5, 6 days ago that the FBI and the Australians had managed to arrest about 800 individuals because they had unknowingly, the FBI and the Australian intelligence community had implanted an app that they were all of these, criminals were sharing, and they thought they were using a very protected, encrypted app when in fact it was the FBI's own app that they had seeded into their kind of criminal community. Anyone remember this story?
Yes.
Yeah, it was Anom.
Yeah, Anom, exactly.
I think is the name of it.
Precisely.
Good story.
Yeah, great story. So there's an update. And the update is from Computer Weekly, and it's a fun little additional backstory that says that the FBI planned this sting against... They planned it together with the Australians over drinks. The Australian Federal Police and the FBI came up with the idea over drinks, build a crypto phone network with a built-in backdoor and sell it to crime gangs around the world. 3 years ago, the FBI began planning...
I love this so much.
It's so good, isn't it? They began planning a sophisticated sting that led to the arrests of 800 suspected organized criminals in raids around the world. Police this week carried out hundreds of searches and seizures of firearms, luxury vehicles, and cash in coordinated operations around multiple countries. The targets were organized crime groups, which had placed their trust in an encrypted phone application called Anam to arrange drug deals, kidnappings, and assassinations. Now, an informer working with the FBI sold Anam Android phones on the black market, claiming it offered users highly secure encrypted messaging services. More than 9,000 encrypted devices were in circulation by the time law enforcement agencies pulled the plug on the network 1 week ago, June 7th, or now 2 weeks ago. Its users had no idea that Anam had been created by the FBI and that their messages were being collected and analyzed by specialists from the Australian Federal Police in Canberra and the FBI in San Diego. The FBI operation, codenamed Trojan Shield, has its origins in 2017 when the FBI office in San Diego began investigating the Canadian crypto phone company called Phantom Secure. The investigation revealed that Phantom Secure was supplying secure BlackBerry devices to criminal organizations, offering criminal secure communications that could be intercepted by law enforcement. And the FBI arrested Ramos in 2018 in an operation with the Australian Federal Police. And I think you can connect the dots forward as to where the story goes. It's quite long, but we just retweeted this out, and thank you to whoever shared it. It's a really interesting...
That is so funny. Do you think that they like deliberately misspelled things, like all the other scam artists do?
Yeah, got to play stupid. Speaking of playing stupid, here's a fun headline, and thanks to who sent this one in, about artificial intelligence has advanced so much that it wrote this article. So here it goes, by Jurika Djumovic. It calls itself as the AI journalist. Natural language processing rivals humans' skills. I did not write this article. In fact, it wasn't written by any person. Every sentence you see after this introduction is the works of OpenAI's GPT-3, a powerful language prediction model capable of composing sequences of coherent text. The only thing I did was provide it with topics to write about. I did not even fix its grammar or spelling, according to OpenAI, blah, blah, blah. And then the GPT-3 writes its own article, which, if you know GPT-3, as Jean-Pierre on stage knows better than anyone in Clubhouse, this is of no surprise at all. In fact, anyone who follows GPT-3 even casually knows that this is basically what this article is journalists just learned about GPT-3 is what this article is really about.
Now wait for GPT-10.
Yeah. Just wait for GPT-4, journalists, and then it'll be writing articles for you with headlines like journalists now looking for jobs it's like
the golden era of journalism.
Chris is, as usual, dropping a humdinger of a pun based on a headline we read about 2 weeks ago, where tech journalists were claiming the golden era of, the classic Silicon Valley business models are coming to an end, which is just laughable if you know anything about tech investing, but journalists don't. So that's why they wrote that stupid headline. And so he's saying, now the real golden era of journalism is coming into an end, which is a much more accurate headline. Because GPT-3 is on the verge of being able to write articles better than most tech journalists, and GPT-4, no doubt, will write better articles than your average tech journalist. Probably do much better research as well. So stay tuned for that. I would love to get a sense. Maybe we can wait for Jean-Pierre interestingly isn't with us. But
but there's did you read the funny statement that GPT-3 wrote himself? The only thing I know how to do is to write about things that I don't know about, which is exactly what the journalist is doing.
Mm-hmm. It's already adopting the journalistic behaviors of tech journalists. Yeah, that's very convincing indeed.
Tyler, I have a headline.
Oh, go ahead, Monica.
Cheeky one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Very cheeky one. So the headline goes like this: that the parliamentary panel in India has turned down Facebook's request for a virtual appearance. It says that they will vaccinate the officials. So Facebook had a request that they will have a virtual meeting instead of a physical meeting because of the company's COVID policies, and the committee in India has actually turned down the request of Facebook, saying that they can vaccinate the officials. So this is rather cheeky, and knowing by where it's coming from, I think this is just associated with the pressure policies and tactics that are being applied, but came out as very funny, specifically coming from India. So just thought I'll share this.
Thank you for that. And by the way, can you just give us a little general update on COVID within India generally, and this Delta variation, and are things getting back in the right track? Because it wasn't that long ago that things were getting very concerning, and now it seems like we haven't. The tone in the voices of our Indian friends who join us every day seem to be a little more positive and optimistic than they used to be. Or am I reading their voices correctly?
Tyler, so you're absolutely right. I think everything seems to be back to normal, which also means that we are not following any COVID appropriate behavior. And it also means that there is no social distancing. So people are actually out and about, which means that the person, the doctor, Mr. Guleria, who actually is the head of a very premier institution of a hospital in Delhi, which is called All India Institute of Medical Sciences, has actually warned that the third wave would be coming in 6 weeks if we continue this way. So unfortunately, I don't have any positive news to share on this account, and I'm actually quite scared because as the country has unlocked, people have believed that they have conquered COVID. What they don't understand is that this is probably going to lead to another explosion. The good news, however, is that the vaccination rates, though slow, are at least steady. I wouldn't say that we are doing a very good job of it because obviously there is a huge amount of vaccine hesitancy as well. Right now, at least in the big cities, we are seeing that the numbers are going up, including in the 18 to 44 age segment, which is decent news, but I think we needed to do a lot more, which unfortunately doesn't seem to have gotten done. So after 21st of June, everybody in the country should get a free vaccine, regardless of the state and any other boundary that separates us. So I'm hoping that we should be able to at least get the first dosage in for a majority of the population, in case there aren't any other concerns about vaccine specifically. There have been rather big rumors on WhatsApp as well as on other channels associated with how the vaccine has components which are related to elements that are not considered sacrilege by religious elements and religious societies. So there has been a lot of that going on. So unfortunately, I'm not very happy today knowing what I'm reading in the press. But yes, the numbers definitely, and the positivity rate is the lowest it has been in a very, very long time. But that means also that people are out and about.
Cool. That's great to hear. Evan, you just shared 3 fantastic articles in a row here. The McDonald's one, the Hydrogen Hotel one, and the Texas Power one. Can we blast through these 3 real quick?
Yeah, well, where America loves its McDonald's, and we'll be soon talking to robots. So,
yeah, McDonald's is replacing human drive-through attendants with voice AIs. This is wild, and it speaks. By the way, the McDonald's CEO, was it not about a week ago that we read a headline where that person said that a $15 minimum wage would really accelerate the drive towards automation at McDonald's. And I made the comment, you might remember that McDonald's was a client of my own tech company, and I said of all the big companies that I worked with, McDonald's was the most impressive to work with, and understands every aspect of their business down to the unbelievable detail, and so they know how things will change. I mean, there's very little unknowns within their operations.
And I guess, is there a room for humans at all in McDonald's? I mean, beyond the voice interface, robots, etc.
You might remember, if you were with us during that headline, that Ellen was on stage from Norway, and I asked Ellen how many staff are in a normal Norwegian McDonald's. I think she said 3, which is about right. It takes about 3 people to run a McDonald's in the Nordics. They're nearly fully automated, in part because the average salaries. And then I believe Poppy shared the headline simultaneously, as she's known for doing, while we were having the discussion about the salaries. And by the way, Johan, who joins us on stage regularly, his daughter apparently has been working at McDonald's for a few years. And we tried to calculate her earnings, and it's in the ballpark of about $20 an hour that they make there. So it's that's why the Nordic McDonald's are nearly entirely automated in part. So except for during incredibly busy hours, which in the Nordics, the really big,
now multiply this by every quick serve, every fast food restaurant, and has big implications for low income, low wage labor, particularly with lots of minorities unfortunately doing these jobs today. It's not good, and probably leads to some kind of UBI concept eventually.
So this article that you shared, it says McDonald's is replacing human drive-through attendants with AIs. The pilot project is in 10 stores and is 85% accurate. Now, I, with my own technology, did a pilot with McDonald's, and this is how it works with McDonald's. They give you a few stores to test, and if it works out well to their benefit, then they start spreading it out, and next thing you know, you're buying your own island in Thailand. But the pilot, as if drive-through ordering wasn't frustrating enough already, now we might have a Siri-like AI to contend with. McDonald's just rolled out a voice recognition system at 10 drive-thrus in Chicago, which is where they test all of their stuff, by the way. Their global headquarters is in Chicago, just outside of Chicago. Expanding from, and by the way, most of the company-owned store, they themselves own a lot of the stores around Chicago. And some of them are specifically kind of shaped around being able to do these tests. And so now they've done the 10-store test near the global headquarters. And this article is kind of clearly the company who's providing this technology is super excited, as they should be. But I could, what I could do is I could call my friends at McDonald's, ask how this test went from their perspective. Although there is a quote here from McDonald's CEO where it says, so they did the 10 drive-thrus in Chicago, expanding from a solitary test store they launched a few years ago. But when will it come to your neighborhood Golden Arches? Here's the quote. There is a big leap between going from 10 restaurants in Chicago, which is their 10 corporate test stores, to the 14,000 restaurants across the U.S. with an infinite number of promo permutations, menu permutations, dialect permutations, weather, on and on and on and on, admitted McDonald's CEO Chris Kopensky reports Nation's Restaurants News. That's kind of funny, because now clearly the startup who has this AI technology is doing a PR piece to promote the fact that they did their McDonald's pilot test, which, by the way, a lot of companies do McDonald's pilot testing that don't make it mainstream. And so when already a journalist, when Nation's Restaurant News reached out to the McDonald's CEO to get a quote from them about this pilot, when the startup contacted Nation's Restaurant News to try and promote this story, the journalist from that publication reached out to McDonald's CEO for a quote, and the McDonald's CEO was like, yeah, it's just a test. Calm down, relax. It's just our 10-store pilot test. And that's kind of funny if you think about what's really going on in this article. But the article continues, are we ready for AI? For those of us still dragging our heels on technology, AI helps shoppers, blah, blah, blah. Is it working for McDonald's? Yes and no, it says. The technology is still in its infancy and only about 85% accurate. 1 in 5 orders needs a little help from actual humans, though the CEO says that one of the biggest challenges actually has been training the employees to take a step back and not help the AI when it struggles. But the CEO estimates that it might only take 5 years for a national rollout to happen. How it came about: McDonald's purchased voice technology from the startup called Apprente in 2019. From there, they built their voice assistant, and you can read the rest of the article for yourself. Interesting, though, and no doubt this will happen. And by the way, Google's own voice technology would almost be even better for this use case, as both Google and Facebook continue to make wild improvements to their voice AI technologies. Yeah.
My friend replied to the tweet, six years to develop this. Meanwhile, their ice cream machines still don't work. So maybe there's some excuses.
I have a news article on that, on the ice cream machine, actually. But it's a print article. It's not like something I can tweet. Yes, I still read those. But first, I wanted to ask Tyler: has there been any backlash in Sweden, given the number of people who are no longer employed by McDonald's, which is going to be adopted by these other fast food restaurants? I don't know if there's been any sort of backlash because they're employing many fewer people than I imagine they were even 5 years ago. And then the second thing really quickly is I think Amanda is in here, Amanda Johnstone. I just saw that she came in here. And Amanda is very good friends with X. So can you tweet, can you ping X to come in here, please, Amanda, if you're in here? I think she is. Okay. That's all. So I just wanted to know what the response has been, and I will get you this story in a minute if you want. I'll get you the story about there are people who apparently wanted to fix the broken ice cream machine, and McDonald's was not interested. Like they wanted to upgrade it, and I thought that was really funny.
Yes, the Taylor ice cream machine rabbit hole. And there was a really good video made recently, like a month ago, by that guy who used to work at Vox, who kind of went independent to make his own YouTube channel. And he does these really fun deep dives, usually around geography issues. But he did the deep dive on the McDonald's ice cream machine.
Johnny Harris.
Yes, Johnny Harris. That's him. So if you Google, he does rock. Google Johnny Harris McDonald's ice cream machines and watch his 30-minute video deep dive into the real rabbit hole. It's a real rabbit. I mean, talk about internet rabbit holes. That is one of them. And it's a fun one. And he really spent weeks trying to get down to the bottom, actually doing investigative journalism about what's really going on with these broken ice cream machines at McDonald's. And there's much more than meets the eye. And it takes 30 minutes to really even give it a thorough listen. But it's a fun video. I highly recommend.
This is because the company has a lock code
Taylor,
in order to fix it, right? That's the story. And then I also read somebody hacked it and figured out how to fix them on their own, and that's why they're working now, right?
Yes. And there's the nature of the corporate-owned stores versus the franchise stores, and it's a rabbit hole. But could somebody please find that video and tweet it at me at TNATW so I can retweet it to the audience so that people can watch that video at their leisure. It's a really fun watch.
I'm on it.
Title?
I'm on it.
Okay. There was, Evan, you had two other really cool stories. The Texas power companies are remotely raising temperatures on residences' smart thermostats. That's wild. What's going on?
Yeah, basically these intelligent smart homes we all love. If you opt into this particular program, energy efficiency program, they have the right in Texas to raise the temperature based on demand. So, people are waking up in the middle of the night in sweating because it's, they raised your temperature to 80 degrees. So it's, you can't rely necessarily on technology when it comes to these smart home scenarios.
But how is it that the power companies are remotely that sounds like a lawsuit waiting to happen.
You
have to have a smart device. Sorry, Chris. If your home is
I mean you opt into this energy saving program without the understanding that
they can
they're going to remotely raise.
The electricity company gives you the thermostat, the Nest thermostat, or the smart thermostat, and in the fine print it says we have the ability to come in and turn this off to prevent rolling blackouts, etc.
T's and C's may apply. Which in Texas now is a disaster. I mean, when it's cold, the heat or it goes out. When it's hot, the AC goes out. So this is just disastrous.
And
Can we
on
agree now? We
Father's
can't
Day too,
call.
right?
Yeah, we
with
can't.
don't touch my thermostat.
Can we agree now we can't call countries third world countries anymore in the U.S.?
Yes,
We love saying
shitholes.
third world because shitholes, third world countries, because this is some serious quote unquote third world country stuff going on in Texas.
Yeah, and doesn't Texas not like the government involved in their backyards? And
No,
lean government, efficient government.
yes. Well, yeah, except when it's lean energy governments that control your
No,
thermostat.
they have their own power grid. That's how
Yes.
they keep it. How they keep their, and that's why it jacks up whenever there's a problem, because they try to keep it artificially low because they're buying directly from the grid. Anyway, it's just amazing how many people are like, everything's great in Texas when they live there until something goes wrong. And they're like, Texas sucks.
I
And
will say
now,
that this. Sorry,
and
Cheryl. I
now
was
all
going
the
to say.
Bitcoin miners are going to move to Texas.
I was going to say that any immigrant child will know what this feels like, and so maybe they're doing this because they know that we're already used to it. I've woken up many a nights in my parents' home where it's like 82 degrees, and my dad's like, "Don't touch my thermostat."
Happy Father's Day.
That's right.
My grandmother used to keep her thermostat, though. Like, we all came in the 70s, and and I wasn't born yet, but my sister was. And my grandmother kept her thermostat at 65 degrees year round because she could. And so she was very much like, I have one now, don't touch it.
So on this topic of kind of hot weather, NBC News, and thanks to whoever sent this one in, drought-stricken communities, which is, by the way, the entire southwest corner of America, push back against data centers as cash-strapped cities welcome big tech to build hundreds of million-dollar data centers in their backyards. Critics question the environmental cost. Watch out, folks, here it comes. And this is a really interesting tech story because in this story, and we just tweeted it out, thanks to whoever tweeted it in. I just retweeted them so you can see this from NBC News. It's about the Apple one of the things they showcase in this story is the new Apple data center in Mesa, Arizona, which, by the way, one of the fastest growing cities in the entire U.S. I believe the second fastest growing city in the entire U.S., even more so than Austin, is Mesa, Arizona, in part due to the Apple data center in Mesa, Arizona, which understandably consumes an incredible amount of electricity, as the story no doubt will mention. And the story starts by saying on May 17th, the City Council of Mesa, Arizona approved a $800 million development of an enormous data center, a warehouse filled with computers storing all of the photos, documents, and other information we store in the cloud. So the cloud is actually in Mesa, Arizona, on an arid plot of land in the eastern part of the city. But keeping the rows of powerful computers inside the data center from overheating will require 1.25 million gallons of water each day at a price that Vice Mayor Jen Duff believes is too high. This has been the driest 12 months in the past 126 years, she says, citing data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We are on a red alert, and I think data centers are irresponsible uses of our water. Oh, no, she didn't. Duff was the only Mesa City Council member to vote against the development, but she's one of a growing number of people nationwide raising concerns about the proliferation of data centers which guzzle electricity and water while creating relatively few jobs, particularly in drought-stricken parts of the U.S. It goes on and on and on. You can do the deep dive yourself. There's some interesting photos of the Apple data center. And this is really interesting, is it not? Because there was if you watched Bill Maher's show, he talked about how all of the almond farmers in California are consuming an incredible amount of water, and California is completely running out of water as well. And should we grow almonds for the world, because California grows 80% of the world's almonds, or should we, have water, for more important uses? and
This is
tell
why you
the
need to put data centers under the ocean, like Microsoft is trialing right now, or in Iceland or other places.
Yeah. So, well, by the way, TSMC 2 months ago had the incredibly difficult decision of choosing between, because they have an incredibly intense drought themselves in Taiwan, and they had to choose between the rice farmers or the semiconductor factories, which both require lots of water. And they told the farmers, sorry, guys, you'll have to wait till next year. Computer chips win. And in this case, it'll be interesting to see if what's going to win, people taking showers or your photos in the quote unquote cloud in this factory, Apple iCloud data center in Mesa, Arizona. It's going to get very interesting. And which, by the way, all of the big semiconductors and TSMC itself is saying that they are building right here in Mesa, Arizona, strangely. These huge semiconductor factories, both Intel and TSMC, are both going to be building multiple massive fabrication facilities around Mesa, Arizona, which has no water. And we were trying to figure out, why are they building these in a place with no water? Which they're incredibly water intensive operations. It's going to get crazy, folks.
Yeah, and also, to the point of Apple's new iOS and their iCloud Plus privacy relay functions, they will be pushing more and more people to switch from anything like, Google Cloud or Dropbox to use Apple Cloud. And so that will just extend the amount of, storage that they will need, and then the energy that they will use under this whole privacy first agenda that they're pushing. And so nobody will really think about the climate or whatever, earth impact. And everyone will be just, switching more and more to Apple, because Apple protects your data, and then everything will be stored in Arizona. And I don't know, that sounds just very dramatic for the Arizona state.
Mm-hmm. So there was, Evan, you had another interesting one about, speaking of saving power, the world's first hydrogen hotel in Japan.
You gotta love Japan. I mean, amazing country.
Indeed it is. Cheryl is in Tokyo herself. And as I used to live not far from her in Tokyo for many years, which I still may end up there at some point. I adore it. And this is partly why. This headline, which we retweeted from Evan, is a really beautiful photo of this very cutting-edge hydrogen hotel in Tokyo, and specifically in Kawasaki, which is in the southern part of Tokyo. It says, the first hotel on the planet to be powered entirely by waste has been opened by Tokyu Hotels in the Japanese capital. In a breakthrough for sustainable travel, Tokyo Hotels has created the first carbon-neutral hotel in the world to be powered by hydrogen sourced from waste products. Situated in the city of Kawasaki, 15 minutes from central Tokyo, which, by the way, that's still within Tokyo, even though it's 50 minutes. I know that sounds far, but it's not by Tokyo standards. Tokyo's that big. The Kawasaki King Skyfront Tokyo Hotel is 30% powered by hydrogen derived from waste plastics. The remaining 70% of its energy comes from food waste, using what they call H2RX technology created by Toshiba. The hotel has a hydrogen fuel cell system, which transforms hydrogen into heat and electrical power without producing carbon emissions. The technology is connected to the hotel via a pipeline, meaning there is a constant high-volume supply of hydrogen, and the supply chain remains carbon-free. And I encourage you to take a look at this very beautiful hotel, incredibly modern, stunning, looks quite Scandinavian, actually. The Kawasaki King Skyfront Hotel. So it's got a lot more text and a lot more photos. Very beautiful hotel, and let's hope that's the beginnings of more to come. And interesting to see that Japan consistently seems to be the really leading on the hydrogen approach. Does it not, Chris? You have some familiarity with this.
It's the common sense kind of energy device. I mean, it's, besides being able to be used in fuel cells, you can actually still combust it too. So, internal combustion engines still work on hydrogen. The only thing that's supposed to come out of it in combustion is water vapor and maybe some nitrous oxides, because air is not all oxygen. And then in the fuel cell, all that comes out is water. So, solar is really going to be the main thing that drives hydrogen adoption, because you need the power to split the water up. And then once you have it split up, it's really about storing it. So that's my take there.
Okay. How about this? Yes, speaking. Was that Mabwana? Sorry.
Yeah, me. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I find this fascinating because we're already starting to see in the safari industry in East Africa, a lot of hotels are converting to carbon neutral, starting with obviously powering the camps that are in the Serengeti or Masai Mara. But also now we're seeing a lot of the safari vehicles that are obviously incredibly noisy. Toyota, this is where the Japanese link comes in, because Toyota obviously is really dominant in Africa for the last number of decades. And I've been to Japan, and they're worried about the transition to e-mobility and whether they're able to keep up. But a lot of the safari vehicles are Toyota Land Cruisers in Africa, and they're noisy and obviously scare the animals away. So there's an opportunity now for a lot of tour operators to switch to electric and essentially have closer to having a fully carbon neutral safari. And of course, during the pandemic, we've seen this sector actually, obviously private planes have been flying into Tanzania. The ultra wealthy are willing to pay a premium for this, right? And so we're going to be seeing like a top-down, at least influence. And I'd love, if anyone's interested in this in Africa, I'd love to partner. But I think this is going to be an interesting space to watch, in tourism, particularly in high-end safaris in Africa. I think that transition is already underway. When you add the water reclamation, etc., and the Japanese interest in maintaining their I guess mobility and market shares in Africa, it's going to get very interesting in Africa on this front.
Well, this is a great segue because what, Cheryl, you were going to comment?
Yeah, there's an article today to say that there's a Japanese tech to slash the green hydrogen cost by 2/3.
Oh, nice.
So I just tweeted, yeah.
That's great. But speaking of Africa and Japan, the Ugandan Olympic team members arrived in Japan today. And that's great because the Tokyo Olympics has been a huge question as to whether or not the Tokyo Games were actually ever going to happen. They have already been delayed from 2020. They were supposed to happen in the summer of 2020. Due to COVID, they were delayed, and they've been, on pins and needles to figure out if they're actually going to have the Tokyo Olympics at all because of COVID. Can they do it? Can they not? Back and forth. And, oh, man, what a drama this has evolved into. And now the Ugandan Olympic team members have arrived, and they have COVID. So, a member of the Ugandan Olympic team tested positive for the coronavirus upon arrival in Japan and was denied entry to the country. In the first known case of COVID-19 among teams arriving from overseas to the Tokyo Games, government officials said Sunday the team member who tested positive after arriving at Narita Airport outside Tokyo, and by the way, that is really outside Tokyo. It's like 3 hours outside Tokyo. That's when you're really getting outside Tokyo, is in Narita. Although unless you take the Sky Train,
Chiba.
Yeah,
in Chiba.
Yep, near Chiba, right? Anyway,
the thing is, this guy actually had 2 shots of AstraZeneca. And tested negative before he got on board. So that's a strange thing.
Yeah, the 8 other members traveled by bus to their host town. And then the Ugandans are the second group of athletes to arrive in Japan for the Tokyo Games, following the Australian women's softball team. And already we've got 1 athlete with COVID. This does not look good, but they weren't allowed in, and I guess the games go on, I guess.
Did you notice how they wrote that according to how you read it? Basically, the first they said, oh, well, there's been other teams that have come in. This is the first one.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's like, well, there's only been one other team that's been through besides us. It's kind of funny.
Oh, man. It's going to be a very interesting Olympic Games. I mean, I've made the half pun often that COVID was the best real Olympics that the world ever had. If we really want to test how good countries are in a sport, COVID was it not? Man. And the U.S. did not take gold, by the way, just for clarity. Yeah, it's let's hope for the best on that front as well. And speaking of AIs, as we were a minute ago, and keeping it on the Asia theme, Chinese fighter pilots have been training against and training AI fighter pilot software. And we covered this one a few days ago, but not everyone joins us every day, both time zones. So sometimes we get people who didn't know we covered this, but it's back, and we will recover it because it's just an interesting headline that China wants everyone to know that they're using AIs to train their fighter pilots, which may or may not be the same fighter pilots that have been encroaching on Taiwanese airspace in new unprecedented levels in recent days. maybe it's just an AI simulation. Who knows what's going on there? But the quality of the computer combat pilots are compared to that of China's elite Golden Helmet Squadron, similar to the U.S. Blue Angels or Thunderbirds, and their ability to learn is impressive. And it's simultaneously kind of a flex on the robustness of Chinese AIs, and of course the fact that they're building up the Golden Helmet Squadron, which is a
So what is Tyler? What does this mean for Tom Cruise and his future as a
means
pilot?
that the future version of Top Gun will be funded by China, as they are funding most Chinese films these days, and maybe Tom attacks Taiwan. I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see what the plot line of that movie is. Wow, who knows? To be continued. On the DNA front, which we touched on.
I got a quick question before we move on from this subject.
Yes,
why do you think China wants to showcase that they're building human capacity to counter AI intelligence in aerodynamics and in airspace combat?
Because they're still feeling sore after getting their asses kicked on Go due to AlphaGo. And they need to show that that's a bad AI joke, because the
well, I think it's also, American pilots are way superior training and capability than Chinese pilots, and so they're trying to consider how to counteract that as well.
We started off now a little over an hour ago talking about I took the 23andMe DNA sample to find out if I had inherited my father and grandfather's kind of fatalistic heart disease gene. And due to 23andMe, I was able to find out that I didn't. And now 23andMe is in the news. And maybe it's because somebody in the audience did a little sleuthing and found an interesting headline. And thanks to whoever sent this in, that 23andMe jumps on the stock market debut as privacy concerns about genetic testing abound, as indeed they should. The company is the latest to go public via a SPAC, and 23andMe, the direct-to-consumer genetic testing company headquartered in Sunnyvale, California. That's not a coincidence that it's the former wife of Google co-founder Sergey Brin is also a little concerning, that as they have a lot of interest in the medical space and data as well. But that's why it's in Sunnyvale. The company is the latest to go public through a special purpose acquisition company, or a SPAC. The deal closed last week ahead of its NASDAQ listing. Shares of 23andMe opened at $11.13 a piece, rising 20% to a peak of more than $13. And it says, founded in 2006, the company offers customers a full report of their genetic data and predispositions to a variety of health issues, ranging from the mild to the super scary, including lupus, Alzheimer's, and Hutchinson's disease, all extracted from a few drops of saliva. While genetic testing companies have proliferated over the past 15 years, 23andMe was a pioneer in the field. Although, truthfully, they themselves weren't doing the genetic testing, although they might do now. But when they started, they were simply a front and a clever marketing for pre-existing labs. And so when I did this, the lab that actually did my analysis was actually a few blocks from my house. And so I went over to the lab that was a few blocks from my house that was actually doing my saliva testing. And 23andMe was simply the branding and marketing, and they would collect your spit and send it to these labs that were already doing these types of analysis. And then they had built a little beautiful web interface to show you your data, because the labs had these, very old computer printout looking results that were very user unfriendly. And 23andMe made a very beautiful shopping cart for you to order and a very beautiful data result email for you to look at your results. And what a great way to build a very big company off of labs that do very interesting work. But I don't know if they have their actual own labs now, but that's how the company started. But the headline is correct from Fast Company that this is happening amid privacy concerns about genetic testing abound, and that's true indeed. And it takes only a little bit of Googling, as I'm sure everyone's going to do when I say this, that China is now genetically testing every single Chinese citizen, specifically Uyghurs, specifically men. And that's not being widely reported. You will find it reported from very reputable sources. And it's interesting to read those articles, and somebody's going to find them and tweet them, and we'll retweet them, and we'll get into the details about why our country's starting to DNA test all of their citizens. And by the way, we had, and you can probably guess, one individual who used to join us daily who no longer does, because they are now very heavily funded by very influential investors to do this in America. And please keep that name to yourself. I'm sure many of you know who I'm talking about.
Dr. Danish, I had a question for you. I also heard this is happening in the NHS in the UK. Is this correct? I'm sorry if you don't have any experience there, but I remember hearing it in a room.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I would be very surprised, but yeah, I have no knowledge of that. And Chris, I'll look into it.
So I've been told by people who know that the governments are very interested in acquiring very large databases of not just facial recognition, which they already now have, but also as I mentioned, China, as usual, in a weird way, I almost commend them because they're quite open about what they're doing with the social credit system, with the facial recognition, and now with the genetic testing of every individual. Like, they're just kind of out and open about it, where other countries are much more covert about doing similar things. Even America, by the way. So, and I've even said that in interviews, which David has read, that I have it on good authority that the U.S. is interested in acquiring and building out profiles of individuals with their genetic information. And you can imagine, police, by the way, do DNA testing at crime scenes all the time. And how they're able to apprehend people, of course, is they get a little hair at the crime scene or a little blood, and then they have to go track down the people they think that might belong to and somehow get hair from them and test them and see if they match. Well, what if they could just build a DNA database of everybody, and then any blood or any hair at any crime scene would be very easy to track down in real time. Well, they do this with facial image stuff now in real time. By the way, they do it with thumbprints now in real time, because if you might remember in middle school, your thumbprints were collected as a child as part of going to school. And in many airports now, when you arrive, including Thailand, they make you do both full fingerprints of both hands. And it's all of this bio data is getting very interesting indeed, including your iris, including your fingerprints, including your DNA, and that your face, your walk. It's like, there are these databases, and governments have a very keen interest in these databases. And just to finish the point, and I'll turn it to Harry, is that I've been told that there are governments that are basically providing this as a product. They're productizing this, and they're using this sounds super conspiratorial, so I got the music on ready here, that a lot of the COVID tests that airports are giving upon arrival, just like our Ugandan Olympic friends at Narita, when they do their nose swab test, they're simultaneously using it they can very easily. That's more than enough genetic data to do like a 23andMe test, and that many governments around the world, when they do all of these COVID nasal swab tests, are simultaneously doing these as building their genetic databases. In many parts, at the immigration counters of every airport where everybody's taking off and landing.
It's far worse than that.
Yeah.
So I had a couple comments that I wanted to cycle back to for like the crime aspect of it.
Okay.
I know there are a couple. There's a New York Times podcast, from the Daily on June 6, 2019. It was a series where they went into how basically a guy was approached by I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been like 2 years now, an FBI cold case department person, and he used a genealogy database to connect people who were like half matches or a quarter match to the DNA that was found in the crime scene. And like they were able to solve a murder case and a couple murder cases through that data. And then the other thing, I sent you a private message, Tyler. I found the articles you were looking for, but I don't want to tweet them out myself.
I'll share them, and thank you for finding them. And welcome Pre-Rock, who I no doubt might be able to contribute. And it looks like there's a couple other folks in the audience who might be relevant as well. Feel free to jump in. So here's an article from the New York Times.
Can I mention
just before you do, 2019, they actually, the New York Times posted an article that the government was actually testing the immigrants that were being detained. And there were various reasons that were given. One was it was to unite people with anybody in the family that maybe like that they had data on, so they could actually give the minors to the family. But most of it was that if any crimes were committed, they'd have them on file. But the government has traditionally done a terrible job in terms of maintaining and acquiring DNA. And you can actually see that in how rape kits are treated. There is a 7-10 year backlog in most jurisdictions. And they have a problem with matching DNA that's degraded or partially lost or things like that. So even as they try to progress with doing stuff like with DNA testing, the problem that they're having is that the government tends to suck at gathering and maintaining the samples that are fragile. So.
I will say one last thing, Tyler, before we move on. I apologize, but one thing that we spoke about maybe a week ago was about the deal of Babylon Health, and Chris brought this up about NHS. Babylon is a UK-based startup that is now making a huge move in the US. And I don't know if people saw the news around Palantir now backing their SPAC. And so talking about, people's data filtering into governments, there's no company out there that is more closely connected to government entities and is now betting on health. I wonder why.
Tyler, if I can mention something about this. I used to manage a division of Quest Diagnostics back in 2003 to 5, and we worked in this space quite a bit. And there is a couple of things that were mentioned. One, the NHS does have a program. There's a conference that's held every year, the Executive Laboratory War College, and it's leading pathologists and lab managers from around the world that come to that. And the head of the NHS program in 2014 came and spoke. But the NHS genomic medicine, I think it's genomic medicine program, they have a mission to test all 55 whole genome testing on all 55 million residents of the UK, and so there is a move for that. Also, the crime database that was mentioned is called GED Match, and that's the one that police departments use. And there's data that goes in there from Ancestry, 23andMe, and other programs that go into that database, and police use that. So they are tracking potential criminals through commonly used, and they have licenses with 23andMe and others to get that data. So that's fairly well established. One thing in the U.S., there's a law in the U.S. called the GINA Act, and it's the Genomic Information Non-Discrimination Act. So there is a specific law precluding the use of genomic testing for discrimination in the U.S., but there's a lot of the testing agencies, Quest and LabCorp included, have been trying to push and get that changed. So just some background on that. Thanks.
Cool. So somebody did send in the New York Times article to confirm what I said a moment ago, that the headline is, and I'm going to retweet it right now, China is collecting DNA from tens of millions of men and boys using U.S. equipment. Even children are pressed into giving blood samples to build a sweeping genetic database that will add to Beijing's growing surveillance capabilities, raising questions about abuse and privacy. And that's from the New York Times. That ain't no blog, y'all. That's a real news organization that stakes their reputation on this stuff. So they don't always get everything right, but they ain't going to say something like that without having the receipts. So I tweeted that out so you can look up that one. And then what was the other one? From CBS News, China's push to control America's healthcare future. For the and there's a video. This is essentially a video, but the text description says, for all the polarization that grips Washington, here's a source of rare consensus: the emerging threat of China's push to acquire our healthcare data, including the DNA of American citizens. Well, this is starting to sound like what I said about 10 minutes ago, that there's governments trying to get building DNA data. Anyway, U.S. officials tell us the communist regime's aggressive collection of our most personal information presents a danger both to national security and our economy. As alarm bells ring across agencies, parties, and presidential administrations, different branches of our government have taken action over the past year to stem the tide of our medical data flowing to China. The quest to control our biodata and in turn control healthcare's future has become the new space race. With more than the national pride in the balance, our investigation begins with an unsolicited and surprising proposal that came from overseas at the onset of the COVID crisis, where it says early last March, the state of Washington was the site of the first major coronavirus outbreak in the U.S. As COVID rates and the need for testing were spiking, BGI Group, the world's largest biotech firm, a global giant based in China, approached the state of Washington with an enticing offer. You can just imagine what it might be. A little free COVID tests, perhaps? For a little, all we need is a little nasal swab. That's all. What could we possibly do with that? No, nothing to worry about, folks. Yes, thank you. I'm going to tweet that link out, and you can watch that video for yourself. Again, that's from CBS News, one of America's longest historied news outlets. So quite concerning development there. I've got a shit ton of articles to get through. Let me see if I have any on the medical front while we're on that theme for 1 second. Well, there is a bio med tech article that many people are sharing about these genetic thumbs, or not genetic, bio augmented thumbs that it's a robotic thumb that you put on. So now you have two thumbs, one on each side of your hand. And it looks very cool. You can see it. And what enables it is kind of like a watch that you wear that connects to the thumb. And it can read the tendons in your wrist as you try to control it. And you can teach this thumb to function in a very cool way, so that once they even show somebody playing guitar with it. And you know, this is our way of fighting back against the robots. If you can't beat them, join them. So thank you to whoever sent that one in. On the kind of international political front, Putin, and this is about the hackers, Putin says Russia would accept conditional handover of cyber criminals to the U.S. And this is a huge issue, which no doubt came up, and we know it came up during Joe Biden's meeting with President Putin in Geneva last week on Wednesday. And so the article says, President Vladimir Putin has said Russia would be ready to hand over cyber criminals to the U.S. if Washington did the same for Moscow, and the two powers reached an agreement to that effect. Putin made the comments in an interview that aired in excerpts on state television on Sunday, ahead of the summit with U.S. Presidential Joe Biden in Geneva. Ties between the powers are badly strained over an array of issues, the Russian leader said. He expected the Geneva meeting to help establish bilateral dialogue. Putin also praised Biden for having shown professionalism. The White House said Biden will bring up ransomware attacks, and Russia-linked hacking group was behind the attack, the U.S. source familiar with the matter said, and you can read this article for yourself from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW, and thank you to, who was that one? Jivan for sending that one in. Looks like Florian found a really interesting one about AIs being used in war. And the headline is, you go to war with the data you have. Next generation AI for national security. AI intelligence is the most powerful technology in generations with the potential to impact U.S. security, welfare, and global leadership. U.S. national security agencies must develop and integrate AI-enabled capabilities to compete and defend in the AI era. However, standard methods and AI technologies fall short. And this is the article is quite lengthy, and it's an incredibly interesting point in conversation in that Israel said that in their latest exchanges around Gaza that their targets were AI driven in determining the selection of targets. They even claimed it was the quote unquote the first AI war of sorts. And then you had even Eric Schmidt, who was well known as the chairman of Google and previously the CEO of Google, now telling Capitol Hill that America must ramp up its AIs because China is, accelerating in their AI developments, and that the future of wars will be kind of AI driven, and your abilities within AI will determine the outcomes of these things, and it gets very interesting indeed in ways that you just don't assume unless you read articles like this. So thank you, Florian, for that one. I'll pause there to see if there's others that people want to share. One last one while we're on the kind of international front. Another New York Times article about inside the deadly serious world of esports in South Korea. Each year, thousands of young South Koreans compete to join pro esports teams, but only a few make it. An American company in Seoul wants to help more young gamers find jobs, and it's indeed esports is sweeping Asia in a way that's hard to imagine in the U.S., where they play in incredibly large arenas, even bigger than the arenas used by traditional sports. And the fan bases of these and the dollars involved are getting bigger than that of traditional sports, like football and soccer and baseball. So it's an incredibly big trend and worth noting because there's incredible amounts of money involved, and it's still the very early days of this kind of booming new esports phenomena. So I'll pause there. See, anyone on stage want to jump in with something hot?
Just on the esports phenomena, hopefully we can do a deep dive on that as well for Asia.
Yeah,
I have a friend who works in the space.
Yeah, I do too. My friend Rickard Steiber from MTG. Interestingly, MTG is one of the Nordic's leading media houses, media conglomerates, Modern Times Group. And the big media companies are all struggling to keep themselves relevant and financially viable. Rickard, being a real pioneer, he led Google in Europe, by the way, and then went over to MTG Group to save that sinking ship, I say with affection. And so he thought the smart thing to do would be to buy up all of the big esports companies, which he did, which has gone very well for them. And I could bring in Rickard now. After he left MTG, he went over to run HTC Vive, the VR company. HTC is a huge consumer electronics company based out of Taiwan. And he ran Vive, the VR goggles for HTC. So he's a really interesting cat. I'll make sure he jumps in at some point, not on Father's Day, though. Let's see. There's a really interesting article somebody sent in from Bloomberg about did the pandemic kill the restaurant menu, which I tweeted out. And it says that many restaurants dropped printed menus during the pandemic because of, COVID on menus in favor of QR codes, sending diners to online ordering platforms using their phones and their apps. This is especially true in Thailand, by the way, which, if Lakeisha's on stage, can confirm. Thailand switched from being all about cash into being cashless for the same reasons, and everything's being done. You can pay at any restaurant by scanning the QR code on their cash register and just wiring, kind of sending the money over digitally. But this article from Bloomberg is all about how even menus are now replaced by QR codes in a very similar way, where you're on your table at any restaurant, there's a QR code that you scan and it brings the menu up on your phone. And that's actually kind of genius when you stop to think about it.
I wonder if it'll mean adoption of QR codes in America, because unlike we barely use them here versus other places.
Yeah, Asia has been leading on QR for a long time, and this is truly funny to think about as one of geeks like Evan, Chris, and myself. Those of us who have been around the block for more than a minute, the QR code thing, especially in America, has been a head scratcher for decades. Actually, this is not a new technology by any means, and it was always wondered when and how will this ever take off? It's cool. But it's one of those technologies that was searching for a use case for over a decade. And strangely, it was COVID that really drove kind of adoption in new markets. And it'll be curious to see if it sticks.
Can I put in my 2 cents on this particular one?
Please do, Chris. Yeah.
I think really what drove it in the States is that Apple finally, built it into the photo app.
Yep.
So now if you just point your camera at any QR code, it will pop up a thing saying, open this in Safari, open this app, etc. So I in general, I think, and I'm an Apple fanboy, I'll admit it. Because Apple's really for the rest of us, the non-technical geek people. And I'm saying this, that I ride both sides of it. That was what I was looking for. I don't want to download another app for QR. You could have always done it from day one with the iPhone, but you had to go download an app, yada, yada, yada. But now that things are built in, it's much like Apple Pay. All these phones have had NFC for, since iPhone 5. And no one knew how Apple was going to use the near field communication, that's RFID, on the iPhone. And then once they adopted Apple Pay, we started getting it, but now I think they're going to start really using RFID in other ways too, where maybe touching things and, checking out and stuff like that. So it's interesting.
It really
and now,
is.
Chris, we got to get ready for malicious QR codes, which will be the big wave.
Oh, shit. You just let the cat out of the bag. Yeah, you're exactly right, though. And by the way, most non-geeks, this is news to them. But essentially, hackers are all about getting you to click on links via email or SMSs and whatnot. QRs are essentially links. So if you scan a malicious QR code, it will send you to a website that will download viruses onto your devices. And so... and by the way, QR codes can be disguised to not look like QR codes. They can look like normal images even. So you could even accidentally point your camera, almost accidentally point your camera at something. It'll, as you know, when you use your camera app, it says, do you want to go to this website? And if you say yes, then you might accidentally download some stuff. It's a really interesting point. Dr. Danish, you just shared a really interesting one about space agencies that are learning how to make food on Mars.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting, especially given that this is probably one of the biggest, when you talk to space and longevity folks, this is probably one of the biggest challenges we have about truly thinking about next steps and being a multiplanetary species. What was interesting to me about this, so NASA and the German Space Agency are investing in space agricultural projects. Places, they test in places like Antarctica and other places like that. But what's really interesting is kind of the full circle connection. So I'm not sure if we've talked about Square Roots, which is a company that was formed.
That's Elon's brother.
Kimball Musk.
Kimball.
It's a vertical farming system platform.
Boulder, Colorado.
Exactly. And so, they're working on that. There's another group that's working on autonomous greenhouses. And it's fascinating how something that seemed like a remote possibility, now there are entire multi-billion-dollar industries around it. And I think perhaps vertical farming could be a solution for some of our own challenges here on Earth. But what's really interesting about this is that how much money is being pumped in by NASA and other space organizations, and how this entire industry is getting privatized. Because to give you some context of how much we're talking about, Bowery Farming just announced a $300 million funding round this June, and it was valued at $2.3 billion. By the way, Bowery Farming is a company that's focused on vertical farming, and vertical farming primarily, most of their long-term vision is around space. Kimball Musk, as we were talking about with Square Roots, that's another big name in the space. AeroFarms has built 136,000 square foot farm in Virginia that is set to open in 2022. We're seeing this happen, and I think ag tech was just the precursor to this entire industry that's going to start developing as we start getting closer and closer to terraforming other planets. So this is just the food on Mars is potentially becoming a
That
reality.
was my favorite scene from The Martian with Matt Damon when he was growing potatoes. I
And
think that was a big
Exactly.
eye opener for a lot of
and
people.
and we may not, and I'm not sure who realize if we all realize this, because that's what's great about this room is you're sometimes in here with people this is their jam. But Florina, this is like what she does.
Yes, it
She's in
is.
deep space food development, so it's just one of those amazing things where things you think that are total pipe dreams are now just becoming
Oh
reality,
no.
like very quickly.
And she's got very deep pockets to fund people working on that, by the way. So she's normally here all the time. In fact, I was just DMing with her less than an hour ago. She says her daughter took her phone and accidentally joined our room here when we started. She says she can't participate today as she's prepping Father's Day shenanigans for the husband. But normally she's yeah.
Since we're in the subject of the food and restaurant,
Uh-huh.
also we should add the cloud kitchen is going to change the entire restaurant industry
Yo,
because
for sure.
it started with your common friend
Yeah.
Travis.
Yep.
I know the company started in 2016, and one of my friends joined 2018 or so. He was employee number 60, and now they have 3,000 people. And I asked him about valuation. I hope I'm not releasing anything that is not public. They're at 22 billion. So I think they're going to change the entire restaurant industry. And going back to the food, I think COVID has helped us to understand how valuable it is to have a good immune system. And immune system comes from good nutrition. So that's it. And also one thing to add about 23andMe, the Google started at the garage of the founder of 23andMe. So that's just a little bit of the history.
Well, and I would like to include something here. And David, by the way, I heard you loud and clear. I heard you loud and clear, and I hope others did as well. So I just wanted you to know that. What I'm at liberty to tell you is that there isn't just a agricultural type program in the works on Mars. There is an aquacultural program as well. And it's a lot further along than you may think, than you may believe. Now, remember when the internet was finally released to the general public, the military had it for over 60 years. We're dealing with a much more sophisticated type of series of programs. So, of course, then, when you're talking about terraforming entire planets or whatnot, they're not going to readily release this information. Now, we've been partnered with NASA for about 15 years. We've licensed several of their technologies, several of JPL's technologies, and so on and so forth. And I'm not sure who the gentleman was that spoke about 2 minutes ago. That well, basically, what what you're hearing is correct. It's just that the programs are a lot further along than we are being told. And you're right, there are certain companies out here, and I'm watching what I'm saying very carefully. Some of these companies that you may have heard of are literally attempting to corner the market before the general public catches on to what the market that I'm speaking about entails, what all technology is involved. So basically, once we started to see that about 10 years ago, we started working with JPL and NIH and other organizations to basically license some of the technologies that they've had on the shelf. And initially, they thought it was a terrible idea until we showed them how we could generate literally tens of billions of dollars by applying their technologies commercially. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's on board. And I've been in some very strange meetings over the last month. And uh, I just understand that that the agenda is a lot further along than you may understand right now. But keep your mind open, keep your eyes open, keep researching.
And any
That's the only thing I could really say without going too far. So,
well, Will, any comment on these flying objects that these Navy pilots are seeing off the coast?
look, I won't get started on that. Not
Okay,
today.
we'll save
Not
that for
today.
next time.
All right, thank you.
Sure. No.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
Did you see the oh gosh, there's a feedback. Did you see the retweet that I set out? I haven't been in the room the last couple of days, but I wasn't sure if how many people saw the little sneak peek of Back Channel on Friday afternoon, and if you guys had discussed that at all.
No, what is it?
Because I know we're going to be going into the town hall in a few minutes, and I thought I'd give you we could chat about that just before going in, because
Okay.
I'm sure they'll address it.
Is that in 8 minutes?
Yeah.
Oh my God, we got a lot of headlines to do in 8 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for anybody who wasn't and didn't see it, I retweeted something that happened Friday afternoon, and I know Evan, I think you saw it as well. So around 4:00 or something on Friday afternoon, somebody, so it was almost kind of funny, like maybe they did it as a little sneak peek. A whole bunch of people who were on Clubhouse and possibly modding rooms at the time, there was a quick update that all of a sudden you saw something that, and if Tyler, if you want to retweet what I tweeted at Tech News Around the World, all of a sudden your screen said Back Channel enabled. And,
I saw that.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden at the bottom of your screen, if you made your, as we're all looking at our screens, if you can make your screen go down so that you're not looking at the room you're in, at the bottom of the screen, what you normally see is there's the 9 dots on the right-hand side on an iOS device, at least. Those 9 dots moved to the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side was like a little paper airplane. And what you normally see as like, so everything from the right-hand side moved to the left-hand side, and if you hit the paper airplane, a back channel opened up on the right-hand side. So it only lasted for under 5 minutes, but those of us who saw it, everybody was like all excited, like, what's going on? It didn't work, but all of a sudden, as quickly as it was enabled, it went away. And a bunch of rooms opened up. Everyone talked about it for hours on end. Like, what's this? What's going on? What's going on? I had a little chat.
Hold on, Tina, hold on. So what you're saying is the UFOs are now in our apps.
Exactly. Exactly. So I had a little Twitter chat with Samaya. I always butcher her last name, but she's rather prevalent. Yes. About possibly it was sort of an homage to the HBO Max people that had an intern that pushed accidentally some code, and maybe they were sort of doing that a little bit, but maybe it was a sneak peek, and maybe we'll hear a little bit more in the town hall. when we go into it in the next couple of minutes.
So, well, let's burn through some headlines real fast before that happens.
Hey, Tyler, could I just comment real quickly on that?
Go, John, go.
Yeah, I was on those calls Friday afternoon when people discovered it, and it was a melee of conspiracy theories, and I don't understand why in an app that people have gravitated to, because the approaches they're taking are generally looking at making the world a safer place to engage in conversation, that their accidental or beta testing of a new capability immediately spawned all kinds of conspiracy theories. Can somebody explain that to me?
The aliens have landed, and they're among us.
I don't think there's any conspiracy. It seems just like somebody pushed it out to prod instead of stage.
Yeah,
and that's just what
right.
happened.
I've seen that happen in so many different contexts, so many times. I think somebody just accidentally picked the wrong environment and clicked on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, could I say something about this? And I'm going to speak this in code, and I pray that you are subconsciously aware.
Like JavaScript?
So to speak.
What kind of code?
I like that. I like that. But I mean, think about it this way. You've heard about the DNA databases. What we haven't been hearing about are the frequency code databases. I'm going to say that again. We haven't been told about the frequency code databases. Some of you, like David, for example, I'm quite sure you know what frequency codes are, so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to storing information...
What's the frequency code? Sorry.
Yeah, what is a frequency code? I have no idea either.
Okay. Well, basically, a frequency code is the vibrational resonance of, let's just say, for example, a particular person. So in metaphysics, what you're talking about are basically the home frequency, as they would call it. So you have frequency codes, liquid crystals, redox signaling, so on and so forth, telomeres, so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to storing information, the government, large corporations, they, especially when you get down to nanoscale, they're thinking, okay, we want to store as much information in as little space possible. So instead of just merely storing physical DNA, they are storing frequency codes now. Okay, and I can't go too much further into it, but if you start looking into the advanced biophysical sciences and explanations of what frequency codes are, if you want to get to the meat and potatoes, I mean, we can go further than the layman type explanation that I
Does
just gave
that
you.
include the IRS, or are they stealing my frequency codes?
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be fun to go a bit further with that.
There is a frequency code database. Legit, there is.
Well,
it is
I mean,
all the list of the frequencies that are available that are governed by the FCC. That's like the frequencies, like
in the background.
Yeah, the radio spectrum database. Yeah, we have one of those in the UK too. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we got a couple minutes. Ben, you do your Tesla headline, Model 3.
Oh yeah, so it's cool. In the UK, some of the emergency services are thinking of using Model 3s, the car I drive, as emergency vehicles, which would be cool because police cars are shit, and it'd be better if they were electric, quieter, faster, and all the rest of it. Yeah. As long as people remember to plug them in when they get back to the station, so they're not flat when you need them, they'll be cool.
There's a really beautiful photo of a live one that you can see that we just tweeted out. Thank you for that, Ben. El Pollo Loco begins begins testing drone deliveries, and you can see the photo of that as well. And thank you to who sent it in. El Pollo Loco is partnering with Tel Aviv-based drone startup called Flytrex for the test, which will start in Southern California. During the pilot, a select number of chains of Loco Reward members in that market will be surprised with one of the first deliveries of the Air Loco drone. And similar to, like I was saying about the McDonald's test, no doubt McDonald's is going to jump into testing air drone deliveries soon as well. And Google's making a lot of progress with that in Helsinki and Australia and a few other markets. And it seems like the drone thing is about to take off. Oh, did I make that pun out loud? I'm sorry. Central Bank of Nigeria could launch pilot digital cryptocurrencies by the end of the year. That's the latest update on that. We're all aware that about 80% of central banks in the world are exploring the possibility of issuing central bank digital currencies, and Nigeria cannot be left behind, Mohammed said on June 10th at a virtual briefing with bankers. If you have a central bank digital currency that is backed by the government, then people can make transactions online without fear of any default, Mohammed said. And Bungie begins selling its official Destiny toaster. It's truly time to get that bread. Alexandra sent this one in. What is so interesting about this toaster, Alexandra?
There's nothing. It's just they're branding everything now with the. I can't believe they actually made it a news story. But so this game is now there's an Xbox refrigerator, and then there's the Destiny toaster. And apparently the toaster isn't great, but it's selling well. It's like a 2-slice toaster, and they're like, it doesn't really compare to any sort of modern toaster. But so now you can get game appliances at a, I don't know, online store near you. So it's just a very silly thing that they're doing.
Alrighty. Well, the Clubhouse Town Hall meeting is about to start, but just want to say a happy Father's Day to everybody. Hope you're having a lovely weekend and a lovely rest of your Sunday, and hopefully see you back here tomorrow. Click on the title, follow the room, follow the Twitter account, which is also you'll see by clicking on the title of this room, and we will see you next week. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.